1 week ago was the culmination of James Gunn's vision. Well, the beginning of James Gunn's vision for the DC universe. That being the end of season 1 of Creature Commandos. An answer to Amanda Waller not being allowed to use humans as weapons. And so, with that, it gives us our first glimpse of what James Gunn sees for his vision of the DC Universe going forward. And with the conclusion of season 1, after the ad read and after the open rolls, I will talk about my feelings on Creature Commandos. Thank you for being here at Mr. Super Oz. This video is going out, and this channel only exists because I, Oz, founded Gamble Comics, which first release was Everlasting Survivors, a 68-page graphic novel called All Day Long. Available now. Follow the link in the description that will take you to gamblecomics.com. While there, you can get hats, shirts, posters, much more, but most importantly, the story itself. Coming soon from Gamble Comics, BC Brute. Josiah and I were talking before watching the finale of Creature Commando Season 1 about my feelings towards James Gunn's Creature Commandos, the launching point for the DC Universe. And I said it this way. I said, if I was to tier rank how I feel about Creature Commandos / James Gunn, right now it goes Guardians of the Galaxy, Scooby-Doo, Creature Commandos, The Suicide Squad, and then Peacemaker. And so, looking at things after the conclusion of Season 1, I must say, my opinion remains the same. I still think Creature Commandos is in the middle of the pack. It has not overtaken Scooby-Doo because it was so respectful toward the characterizations of those characters, and it surely has not overtaken Guardians of the Galaxy, which is interesting because, to me, Guardians of the Galaxy, the James Gunn version, was not exactly or precisely faithful to the comic version of the heroes I had read about, but what it did do well was it cared about the characters within the context of the story, and with that, I think that's potentially what we can look forward to for all of James Gunn's DC Universe, because that is my major takeaway from Creature Commandos. So I can't say that I've ever read a DC comic, which I have plenty of, with Dr. Phosphorus. I probably have seen G.I. Robot at some point show up, but I know I've got Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein in comics, but I've never seen Nina, I've never seen Weasel show up, and like I said, I've never seen Dr. Phosphorus, but the thing that I can say is James Gunn is skilled at taking characters that people don't know about. Let's go back to the concept of Guardians of the Galaxy. Most non-comic reading Marvel fans did not know about Groot or Rocket. And surely not Drax or Gamora or Star-Lord, legendary Star-Lord. Who? But after James Gunn made the movie, the original movie, people did know and care about these characters. And I feel the same way when it comes to Creature Commandos. And so my hat says villain, but I just don't feel like most of these characters were actual villains. Weasel, clearly not a villain. His backstory, while people said that he took out kids, that was not the case. Nina, who is treated as though she's a monster due to her appearance, surely not a villain. Now, the bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein, they have some tendencies that can be perceived as on the villainous side. Dr. Phosphorus has abilities that really lend to him seeming villainous, and Rick Flag Sr., played by Crossbones from Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Age of Ultron. Yeah. So he certainly could be perceived as to having that sort of potential, but even he himself, I think, is less of the actual villain. But again, this isn't straight up Suicide Squad. It's just Suicide Squad adjacent, because the Creature Commandos are, like I said, they're in that vein, in that style of characteristic, but when it comes to Suicide Squad, there was no real argument to be made about those villains not being villains. Like Harley, definitely bad. Captain Boomerang, lots of them actually had villainous backgrounds. Whereas here in this, most of the characters just seem to be perceived badly due to their appearance, because especially I think Nina more than any of them, and that's like I said, a character I didn't know much of anything about or anything, but by the end, when she no longer makes it to the finish, I was like, man, it really goes to show how James Gunn excels at accentuating emotional moments, especially in cases that you don't expect. Like I said, you wouldn't think that you'd care about a talking tree or a semi-aquatic, humanoid woman, but the way that he's good at setting up those layers of characteristics, it really makes it matter. And the same with Weasel. When we see the Weasel's backstory, it's like, man, if this would have been revealed in The Suicide Squad, then that character would have mattered so much more for the context of that story. Whereas here, so the team is sent to both save and then subsequently kill a princess from a made-up land. And they both save, and then in the end, the Bride of Frankenstein kills the princess of this made-up land. Because Cersei has a vision that states that this princess, as the bride called her, this wicked Disney princess gone mad character, is going to be the downfall of everything, the world. And so, with that, the bride does take her out, but not because she's going to end the world, but because the princess killed Nina, the bride's, who she felt was her only friend. And yeah, it just made the Bride of Frankenstein seem so much more human in this moment. I mean, Victor Frankenstein, the whole backstory of him creating the bride for his monster was well done, and it was shocking when Victor took the monster's bride as his own. But even the monster Frankenstein was such an interesting take on the character, because I think he's a sheriff from Stranger Things, or the guy who played the semi-recent Hellboy, that actor, who's also Red Guardian in Marvel, he just went a whole off the wall direction with Frankenstein, almost as though he was a permanent adolescent. And so his time working with Rick Flag Sr. to figure out whether or not the princess was truly the cause of the end of the world or not was interesting. And then when they, Rick Flag Sr. and the monster Frankenstein, when they took out Clayface, it was surprising because I don't know, I just don't tend to think of Clayface as so defeatable. I see him as temporarily stoppable, but not permanently defeated. But when Amanda Waller and John, the guy from Peacemaker and Suicide Squad, show up and Clayface is still in tatters at this house, I was like, oh, I didn't really see him as a staying dead kind of character. But yeah, like I said, the biggest thing to me was just how James Gunn excels at bringing such relatability to non-human characters, whether, like I said, it was Groot or Rocket, all of Rocket's compatriots in Guardians 3, or now Weasel and Nina. And with that, it just gives me such hope for the summertime when we get to see James Gunn's vision for Superman. Because, let's be real, while, yes, Superman appears human and he was raised in Kansas, he isn't human, he's an alien, and he deserves to be given that treatment where you can see where he's coming from, that outsider perspective where you can empathize with his otherness instead of feeling his, feeling fear of him, like I so often got from the Zack Snyder portrayals, and then him, the hiding and all that. I don't need that in my Superman, and so I really want this coming version of Superman to be given, and not just given the type of backstory or care with the backstory that we get with the lesser characters like a Weasel or Nina, or less known characters like a Rocket, but I don't just want it, but I think that we'll get it because these are the ways that James Gunn helps audiences understand his characters. And so, yes, it's 1 week after the finish of Creature Commandos, but with that, if you haven't watched Creature Commandos on Max, I think that it's worth the time. Like, in that watch or don't watch scenario, I think that it's certainly worth giving a watch just to see how executive producer James Gunn deals with characters in this DC universe, and how that it gives us a perspective on what might come or how things could be treated when further projects come out. Like I said, Superman in the summer, and the way that these characters were not quite heroes, not quite villains, kind of helped me see Peacemaker in a different way. I still don't like the show. I thought that it was overly ridiculous. But part of it, I think it really comes down to John Cena. Because had it been any other human being on the planet, I wouldn't have seen the actor as the squeaky clean, shouldn't be doing the things that this man is doing kind of guy. And I understand that John's trying to get away from that goody-good to some degree. Sure, I'm with it. But when you have 20 some years of a vision of somebody and then you see them acting a fool, and this even goes as far back as the Suicide Squad. I was very unhappy with him taking out Rick Flag Jr., who I thought was the best, most human, the most heroic of the team. And so it bothered me when Peacemaker, John Cena, a man I thought should be good, by just looking at his face and knowing him for so long, that's what bothered me about that. And then when he gets his own show and he's everything about it's wrong, the alien story, the I don't like the team, all of it. If it had been anybody else, let's say they cast who's a muscle bound person. Oh, let's just for hypotheticals say that Alan Richardson was cast in the role of Peacemaker as opposed to John Cena. At least I wouldn't have had that 20 years of established, this is my expectation of that man going into the show. And while I could have still not liked it, I may have been more forgiving. Because I think that's one of the reasons why I think Creature Commandos is so worth watching, is because there's no backlog of Dr. Phosphorus opinions I have tainting the way I think it should go. There's no, oh man, that's not how Nina should be going on in my head. Whereas with John, and it's not even necessarily by intent, but just because he's so ingrained in the brain, that I think that's one of the big takeaways. But yeah, like I said, this isn't a watch or don't watch, but because it's a TV show, I will say I think Creature Commandos is worth watching, and they tease season 2 and the introduction of King Shark joining the team, which I think is top quality stuff. Big fan of King Shark. And so, yeah, thanks for tuning in, and come back all next week.